All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm filling in for Randy Leonard, who was unable to join us due to some airline scheduling snafus. As you all may be familiar with the federal fiscal year, our new federal fiscal year began October 1st. And oftentimes we have travel snafus that happen when we travel here early on. Since I'm from our resource center just south of Chicago, I drove, so didn't have any issue. Traffic moved well, thanks to the tollway and all the traveling public. So my understanding is there were 4 questions that got sent out to the Midwest states to reply to. In the Word document that was provided to me, there were responses from Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma. And we have our gracious panel members to join us up here to kind of ad lib and talk about the replies. So what I plan to do is just step through each question. They're up here on the slides. We'll kind of rotate who goes first up here, so you don't always have to be the first one starting off. Kind of like to do that. And we'll kind of see how we go from there. Might open it up to maybe a question or two from the audience of our panel members as we move forward. And then Jason is going to be our mic runner. Is that true? If we have a question from the audience as we move forward. So again, thanks Mark, Mike, and Dave for being up here in the forefront to discuss performance measures and asset management plans. We'll see that some of the questions are focused on bridge maintenance, perchance, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first questions describe the state's bridge maintenance organizational structure and number of personnel, so kind of get into whether you're decentralized, some of the capabilities and the resources that you have available. And since Dave is first to my left, I'm going to let David start first.
Okay, thanks, Larry. I'm with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. I work in central office, the Division of Maintenance, the Bridge Preservation Branch, and this consists of 15 people. We have about a $25 to $30 million budget consisting of state and federal money. And this is dedicated for contracted repairs, painting, and preservation actions. We have 12 district offices across the state. The districts do the majority of our bridge inspections. And we do the inspections on both state-maintained structures and county-maintained structures. Each district has, on average, 1 bridge engineer and about 3 bridge inspectors. Each district also has at least 1 bridge crew, which may be anywhere from 5 people to 7 people. And they have a bridge maintenance budget of about $1 million.
All right, thanks, David. Mark?
I'm Mark Tranowitz. I'm the state bridge engineer for Nebraska Department of Roads. We're much different. We're the bridge division is centrally located, and we have 8 districts. All of our bridge inspections are done through the central complex. We've got for the state system, we've got 2 sets of 3 inspectors. We've got 3,500 state bridges that they do the inspections for. All the local bridges, we've got a little over 11,000 local bridges, and the counties and cities are responsible for those. We do coordinate the inspections for all the fracture critical bridges on the local side. So basically the state hires consultants to do that work. There's about 900 fracture critical bridges on the local side. We don't want to get too much into it, but we keep trying to get those replaced because they're expensive to, they're just expensive to inspect. And many of them are on, very low volume roads. As far as state maintenance, we've got a couple of districts that do some things, where they actually do some repair work, can do some joint work, can do some substructure work, but most of it is really most of it's through our bridge management and is contracted out. if we've got a bridge that is at the end of its service life and we're just kind of letting it limp through until we have it programmed for replacement, once in a while we'll have surprises there where things will pop up and we'll have to do some, put together a quick set of plans to do some repairs. But generally, all of our maintenance, except for, they do some flood washing, those types of things, or just, simple repairs. Most of it's done through contract, through the central headquarters.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, my name's Mike Brokaw with Ohio. We are decentralized. We have 12 districts, 14,000 bridges. And if I could show you an organizational chart, you could see how decentralized even the maintenance. When I read the question, bridge maintenance, we really don't have a bridge maintenance section. We have 12 districts, as I said, and about 4.5 districts have an actual district bridge crew where there will be maybe one guy is in one of the districts and maybe up to 6 people to do work on mainly patching concrete. The remainder is an HT, a highway technician crew that does a lot of work, and bridge is one of the things that they do. And so their specialty is snow and ice and cutting down trees and making sure the public is safe, and they're not really going underneath bridges all that often. So really, our organization is run through our planning and engineering where we'll release contracts at the district level. And there's a few, very few maintenance initiatives that come out of central office. Recently, we've done a little push to do some cleaning and sealing and sweeping of bridges, and that was a central office push, and districts can decide in-house or contract. So it's kind of the basic.
All right. I probably should have shared with the audience, and for those that may not have seen what the questions are that we're going to go through. So if you do have questions as we go through, you might find a more timely aspect to ask that. So the next one's, how are bridge maintenance activities determined, prioritized, tracked for completion? Then the third one was, what are the typical bridge maintenance actions performed by your state forces versus by contract? And then the last one was successful bridge maintenance activities that your states utilized that resulted in extending bridge service life, or for the element or for a bridge. So those were the 4 common questions. These have been asked, or I guess this is the last of the annual regional type sessions. They're all going to be combined, and a summary will be provided to all the partnerships. So if you provided a response, thanks. If you didn't, I think you still have time if you want to get that in before all the responses get summarized. All right, so let's move on to the second question about how are the bridge maintenance activities determined, prioritized, and tracked for completion. So I'll just step down the line and let Mark go first this time.
Okay. Again, we don't do a lot of we don't do a lot of maintenance with state forces. We used to do a little bit more. Our bridge inspectors would go out and inspect the bridges. That's how it used to happen. They would go and stop in at the maintenance shops, if you will, talk about what they found. That worked for a while. Then we got to the point where our inspectors would fill out a maintenance form, and we really made it very simple. It used to have a lot more in there, where some things they could do, some things they couldn't do, and it used to be where the districts, as far as any bridge work, the district would have a budget, and they would have to program the projects. We would, as a bridge office, we would talk with them about what projects we thought they should program, and then they would decide what they want to do based on their roadway work. It's changed since then. The bridge office now basically has a bridge budget, so we have a lot more say on what projects go where. So now what we do is basically, once our inspectors go out and fill out a maintenance checklist, we put it basically on a server for the districts to go out and find. They know after we've been in the districts. And it's really simple things like, maybe some patching or some erosion or remove trees, things like that. So we've really watered it down to some pretty simple things. So as far as prioritizing maintenance, if you will, it's the definition between maintenance and preservation, and we're really doing it from central headquarters.
Okay, thanks, David.
Well, in Kentucky, as I said before, we've got 12 districts. The bridge engineer in each district sends the central office a prioritized list of bridges in need of repairs. And we try to spend at least $1 million in each district. The central office puts out the contracts. The bridge engineer also generates work orders using the AstroAware bridge management for his bridge crews and tracks those work orders until they're completed and puts that into BRM. Like I said, we do all the contracted repairs through central office. As far as I know, the district doesn't do any contract repairs. They do, the districts do some minor repairs. They got a small budget, and one thing that hurts them is, we call them bridge crews, but technically they're called structure crews. So they get pulled off. Anytime there's any concrete forming that needs to be done, they come get the bridge crew, because they're the only ones that know how to do bridge or any kind of structures work.
Thanks, David.
As I said, Ohio's decentralized, so we rely a lot on the expertise of the district bridge engineer. The district bridge engineer supervises anywhere between 2 and 5 bridge inspectors, bridge specialists is what we call them, MBI team leaders. And we do an annual inspection in Ohio, it's a state law. So every year we're looking at all 14,500 bridges, including local agencies. We have 45,000 bridges. And every year they're looking at them. So every year that district bridge engineer is required to put their name and PE license or PE number on every report. By doing so, we trust that they've filtered and they've put the maintenance needs where the maintenance needs need to go. And it's really a lot of that work and the filtering and the prioritization is on the shoulders of the district bridge engineer. Now, if the road's getting paved, and that the joints need work, and the roadway person is supposed to talk to the bridge person at the district level, then hopefully they can include some of the joint work within that paving contract. So there's a lot of that happens at the district level. We measure, we have basically a scoreboard. We look at 4 things. We look at the overall condition of the bridge. It's the lowest of the super or substructure or culvert rating. That's one rating. We look at the paint condition, and we look at the wearing surface condition, and missing one, the deck condition. So we look at 4 things, and we tolerate, it's weighted by deck area, so we tolerate up to 2% bad, basically for 3 of them, and 10% bad for paint. And the districts are supposed to stay within the tolerable limits, so we do have very rough guidelines so we can track over time condition and trends, more for allocation, but it's also a check to make sure that we're prioritizing where, preservation and replacements correctly.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So to make this a little more interactive, we're doing pretty well on time, so I'm going to give the audience an opportunity to ask a question or two. So anybody have a question of any of our panelists? I think we have one back here, Eric.
Mike, you mentioned 14,000 bridges. Does that include your locals or just the state DOT bridges that you're inspecting every year?
Let me define what a bridge. So I forget how. So we define a bridge as something greater or equal to 10-foot clear span, and that's the 14,500 state structures. In all, there's 45,000 structures greater or equal to 10 foot in the state. And we have 88 county engineers that are publicly elected, and we have about 220 municipalities that own bridges. So we have a lot of users. We're really decentralized in that way. So it's a lot of training. We do a lot of training and I can't remember the number for the NBI, the greater than 20 foot. I think it's 26,000 for the entire state, and about, I think, 10,000 for state bridges greater than 20 foot. So a bridge is not always a bridge. Yeah.
All right. Bill had another question, then.
Do each of your states have a pretty significant fleet of like reach-alls and stuff like that that are owned by the departments or by the states, or how do y'all deal with that?
I have 4 bridge inspectors, and they work with me. We have 2 Aspen Aerials. One's a 62-footer and one's a 50-footer. And we have we went through a process where we really had to standardize and structure their workload. So we recently wrote a manual to make sure that that we kept them, and we kept them utilized. And so we have two of them, and we have about 850 bridges that would qualify for a reach-all inspection. And we manage those, probably we do about 415 of those every year at a central office.
Yeah, we just purchased 2 Aspen Aerials this year. So, and we just had training on one and getting training on the other one soon. Prior to that, we had 2 old Snooper trucks that were old and broke down all the time. So we had to get out and do the fracture critical, had within arm's reach. We really had a few years gap that we didn't get under some of the bridges we probably should have. So with this, we're getting a new program, getting under the bridges, especially the pin and hanger bridges. We won't look at them every time, but we'll put them on a routine, probably every 3rd inspection for those, depending on the condition. And we had some that we would have to get a man lift underneath, the ones that we could, that were on a road, would have to shut a lane. So we've had to improvise for a while. So now that we've got the 2 new, we're pretty excited about that.
You call them reach-alls, we call them Snoopers. Kentucky has 3 Snoopers. We've got an Aspen A75, we got a Paxton Mitchell that's got about a 60-foot reach, and we have another Aspen A40. We also have 3 Hydra platforms. Does everyone know what a Hydra platform is? If you don't, talk to somebody that does. These things are extremely valuable. These are trailer-mounted pieces of equipment that can reach underneath a bridge, and it's got a platform that extends out to about 35 feet. We use them for both inspections and maintenance. And where it becomes real valuable is on our Snoopers. We only allow those for inspections. We don't allow them for maintenance at all, for fear they get beaten on concrete. Something will fall on those control boxes, and those control boxes are like $10,000 to repair. We also just purchased a man lift that's got a 60-foot reach. All this is operated out of central office. We have one guy that travels around the state that oversees the training and operating of this equipment to make sure it's in good running shape and done so safely.
Mark, did you have a question?
I just, the response to Mike, did you say you inspect all of your bridges every year instead of every 2 years?
Yes, annually.
That's pretty good. That's a lot of bridges.
For your Snooper trucks, do you allow local agencies to utilize those as well?
It's a theme for us. We have to play really nice because we do a lot of sharing, and we've tried our relationship with the locals using the reach all in about 4 different ways, and we haven't found one way that's worked perfectly. The one way that we're working with right now is we just said we'll give you 40 a year, and you tell us which ones. And so for the last 3 years, we've done, somewhere, this year we're just going to do 27 of the 40 because of miscommunication, or we'd show up and notice that it was a dirt road leading, to get to the bridge, you had to go over a timber deck, and we don't like to drive over timber decks. It's a permitted load. And so we often cancel them, but yeah, currently we threw 40 out, just pull it out of a hat, said you can have 40, and we're probably going to revisit that. We have a County Engineers Association who's fortunately centralized, and there's one person there that's making a local agency process for requesting, Snoopers. So that's how we're handling it currently.
Yeah, with our new trucks, we're talking about it. So I'm glad to hear that you're going through that, so we'll just learn from Ohio. But yeah, since we've got new ones, we talked about how do we work with the locals and get it out there when we can. Of course, I'm assuming you bring an operator goes with it. Yeah, so, yeah, we're trying to figure that out from Nebraska.
Can I ask a question of the audience? Let me ask a question of the audience. And I saw this in a magazine. Does anyone have a boat that has an inspection arm to it that you can reach up and look underneath bridges? How does that work? How well does that work? I just envision whoever's up there in that bucket has got a very rocky ride.
One of our inspectors did several bridges with it last year, and he said that he had a skilled operator and he kept it in the channel very calmly, and that he was hardly moving at all. That you get more sway out of like a UV-50 just with traffic shaking it than you would on the boat. So he had nothing but positive things to say.
Yeah, it is a pontoon boat. So with the two pontoons, they actually have a machine, or to travel on the road, because they truck it out of the East Coast. They have them narrow, but they have a mechanism to open up the pontoons for additional stability. And he actually said, I was worried because he came and we were in the middle of a flood. And I'm like, oh, gee, the water's going to be fast and it's going to be harder. He said it was easier when the water, because he could push against the water. If you've been out, I haven't been out, I'm not a big boat person, but, I could see where he was coming from. When you're trying to control the boat, if you don't have anything to push against, it's kind of hard to maintain your position. So I went out one day with them, and it worked pretty good. I was really happy with it. We have some bascule bridges that are impossible to take a snooper on. You can't get the snooper through the trusses. So you have to do it from below. We had previously rented a barge with a tugboat and put a man lift on that, and that actually was harder to maneuver than this pontoon boat. So I was very happy with it. It didn't save me much money, though, I'll say that. I think it saved me some time because they were able to maneuver quicker, but it's not going to cut your costs in half compared to the barge and the tugboat.
Thank you.
Okay. For the sake of time, we're going to move on, but if we have more time at the end, we'll definitely have some more engaging conversation. So I'll move on to the third question, which was, what are the typical bridge maintenance actions performed by state forces, and then those by contract? And let's see, I think we'll start with Mike this time.
In general, I'd say our state forces perform the cleaning, the riprap placement, the deck patching, emergency patching. We do a lot of delaminate or loose concrete over traffic, as really extremely reactive. We have some districts, and we like to share equipment sometimes. If we find a fatigue crack, we'll drill the end. We'll mag drill. The rest is contract. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Nebraska, we're pretty limited with what our state forces do. They do some sweeping, they do some flood washing of the bridge decks. We think it's important to get underneath them with power washers, and I think that's probably the most important thing you can do is wash the bearings. One does out of the 8, so we're trying to get the others to do that also. We do some contract washing for some of our bigger bridges where they'll get under and do the do the whole bridge. We do in Nebraska. We've gone to a lot of asphalt overlay with waterproof membrane. So actually, that makes the bridge easier for our districts. To do. They know how to deal with asphalt. They know how to seal asphalt. They know how to do those types of things. So they do that just as if it were the road on many of the structures that we have asphalt on.
In Kentucky, our state forests primarily are used for concrete deck patching, resealing expansion joints, traffic control, curb and handrail repairs, cleaning gutters, drains, substructure patching, and they do some minor scour countermeasures. Of course, this is all when they're not getting pulled off by other maintenance folks, so they can be used for forming concrete. And by contract, contractors do all that, but on a much larger scale. They do more of our structural steel repairs, overlay projects, both asphalt and latex modified concrete. Anything that's got a complicated repair, we typically contract out.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? About the gentleman in the gray jacket back there?
I'm not quite sure if this is something just unique to Canada or not. When you're doing your bridge washing, do you have quite a trouble with environmental concerns and regulation? And what and what steps do you take to try and counteract that, to control that?
I just wrote our bridge washing special provision in Michigan, and if you refer to it as a pre-inspection cleaning, they don't even notice it.
Was there another question over here? Can't.
You guys can answer too.
I was just going to ask, you said you contracted out your major repairs. Are you doing in-house design for that, or is that just like maintenance actions that you're contracting out with services, professional services, or how are you, I guess, administering those actions?
The contracts we put out through what we call the Division of Construction Procurement. They handle all the contracts for the cabinet-wide. If there's any design that goes with that, typically that comes from out of our Division of Bridge Design, although we do have some design capacity in our branch, but just depends on the level of complexity.
Just to give insight on the cleaning, we started this cleaning thing, like cleaning the seats, and we wanted to get them clean, just like everybody. And I'm trying to think, maybe a year and a half ago, we started the process with the EPA, and we've jumped through all the hoops, including one of the hoops we jumped through is took off all the bridges that had red lead paint on them, so that we could just keep moving forward. And we've had some issues. We've had meetings with EPA on bridges where we're demoing how we clean. And another example is if it's over a protected waterway, we have to do the scuppers with a vac truck. And so we've just tried to bend where we needed to bend just to get as many bridges cleaned as possible, and working with them. As an aside, we had a public meeting where we invited anybody and everybody that wanted to comment on the permit that we fashioned, through many drafts, and we sat there for 30 minutes, and nobody showed up. So there was either no complaints or everyone thought, yeah, that makes sense. Let's get our bridges cleaner.
Any other comments from the panel on cleaning?
In Kentucky, when we're bridge washing, we do very little as far as with state forces. It's 99% by contract. But now, what we did, and I'll talk about this in the next question, but back about 6 years ago, when I tried to get this program started, we hired a bridge maintenance engineer, and I told him, I want you to go to environmental analysis, who are our EPA folks, and tell them, this is what we want to do. We want to wash bridges, but we want to do it legally. We don't want to get in trouble with you guys. Just show us what we got to do to stay out of trouble. And what he was able to do is take the environmental folks out into the field and show them how, with our washing, and this is not really a high pressure washing, it's more of a quantity washing, that whatever contaminants came off the bridge was so diluted that it mattered nothing. It didn't register anything. So from that point forward, the environmental folks were on our side.
Washington State was real successful with that, and I'm sure they'd be glad to share their work they did with their DES. And, you know, they put together a pilot program and proved that the turbidity before and after washing was insignificant. And they worked during periods of high flow.
Okay. Let's move on to our last question, then we'll give the audience an opportunity in. So the last one is, again, looking at successes and bridge maintenance activities that your state's utilized in extending the service life of an element or bridge. And we'll let David start off with our last question.
In 2010, Kentucky began contracting out preventive maintenance actions. And this was no small task either. I mean, I've been with the cabinet for 30 years, and from the very beginning, I was preaching preventive maintenance and was just basically scolded because we don't have enough money for repairs, let alone preventive maintenance. So when we were able to get the go-ahead in 2010, that was a milestone for us. We do 3 or 4 corridor projects a year, which consists of about 15 to 25 bridges. Now, a corridor project, what I mean is we have parkways that are built to interstate standards, and we'll do all the bridges on that parkway, which amounts to as many as like 25 bridges. We don't do any deck washing, mainly because then it sets up traffic control and it gets more expensive. But the preventive maintenance actions that it does include applying a coating of water repellent grease on the steel bearing devices, cleaning and coating the steel beam ends, cleaning the gutters and drains, coating the abutment caps, pier caps, and barrier walls, and the plinth walls and curbs with an approved water-resistant type of paint. Not just a clear sealant, but a paint that has been tested by the University of Kentucky Transportation Center and has shown that these paints have a lot of durability. All of the above are pressure washed before applying the grease and coatings. We spend about $1 million on this activity. And in 2018, we're scheduled to use $2 million for this contract of preventive maintenance. And why I mention this is right now we're using $1 million out of our bridge maintenance budget. In 2018, upper management is dedicating another $2 million that I don't have to touch out of our maintenance budget. The districts have seen how well this is going and like the results, so that whenever they get any downtime, it's not very often, the districts now are doing some bridge washing and preventive maintenance actions and applying grease on the bearing devices and that kind of thing. So it's starting to pick up momentum.
Thanks, David.
In Nebraska, before MAP 21, when there was a highway bridge program, Nebraska worked through FHWA and got a approved systematic or preventive maintenance plan. So that was, so we could spend federal money on maintenance or preventive maintenance. Now with MAP 21 and the FAST Act, we don't necessarily need that, but what it led for us was to do things. It started out as epoxy polymer overlays. We're trying to figure out how do we keep the salts out of our bridge decks. We new bridges, we've moved the joints off the bridges, so we're trying to, on the older bridges when we do work, we're moving the joints off the bridges. But we're sealing the bridge decks with epoxy polymer overlays, and now probably more so, like I said earlier, the asphalt with membrane. So We see that as working. We've got some, I think all the states had done some asphalt membrane probably in the early 70s, 1970s. We looked back at some of those bridges. I've got a presentation in the morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of them, but we see that they've worked out really well. So we're kind of going back to the future, if you will. So we see really what the maintenance it's doing for us is just keeping the moisture and the salts out of our bridge decks, getting the joints off the bridges, keeping the ends of the girders from getting salts to them. So that's helped us a ton.
I'm struggling with my answer because I don't know. I mean, replacing an overlay, is that a maintenance? I'd say some of the things that we've done that have really helped is just replacing the paint, replacing overlays, waterproofing. We do a lot of adjacent pre-stressed box beams on our 2-lane, waterproofing those, and replacing decks. I don't know if I'd count those as maintenance activities, but we struggled with initiating the cleaning, sealing, and sweeping because we didn't know if it would extend the service life. I mean, intuitively it makes a lot of sense, but how do you prove that? So that's one thing that we kind of went around and around and around on. So I'd like to hope that what we're doing now is actually going to extend the service life. It makes it inspectable, more inspectable, but probably the best thing, and we try to get these with our standards and our specifications, is converting to semi-integral or moving the joint entirely has been probably our biggest help. And elastomeric bearings, I mean, kind of the normal stuff that I see in a lot of your specs. I think we probably stole it from somebody. We didn't initiate it, but.
All right, thank you. Again, back to our audience then. Got a couple questions up front.
I just had a comment based on the last thing, does deck sealing work? The Bureau of Materials and Physical Research for IDOT did a several-year study, side by side, sister bridges, seal this one, don't seal this one, look at the chlorides, et cetera, and the conclusion was it does work, we should be doing it, and we've kind of sort of implemented a program to do that. So if you were looking for justification, or if anyone else was, we'd be happy to set you up with the internet PDF link or whatever.
Yes.
Nancy. Oh, there's the mic.
I was just going to ask you, because you said you waterproofed some of your bridges, and I was just wondering when you say waterproof, what did you use? What material? Was it
Spray on versus roll on, is that what you mean?
well, whether it was just like a silane type material, is that what you're talking about, a surface treatment, or did you use a?
Oh, so we have so I'll answer it two different. So we have adjacent pre-stressed box beam bridges that are coming, shipped in, laid in. And then we used to just, not we used to, but that waterproofing membrane that goes between the box and the asphalt is what I was referring to. We have thousands of those.
And so that's what you were talking about, the waterproofing membranes, and that's what you've done. Okay.
But for the sealing, to answer your question, we're going with HMWM or gravity-fed resin. That's what we're going with now. So.
And is that what kinds of materials did you do
I don't remember exactly all the details, but there were several different material types that were used, and if I remember right, linseed oil of all things was like the best one. So.
Okay, we got a question in the back from Sarah.
I feel it's going to be an answer for me.
I'm interested in the waterproofing membrane. I've been anti-asphalt overlays and waterproofing membrane because it seemed like we put it down in the early 70s and we used magic asphalt because the roadway would get resurfaced every 10 to 15 years, but because that asphalt was on a bridge, they had to skip it because they didn't want to touch the waterproofing membrane, which was still apparently working 15 years later. So I ended up with asphalt that was 30 years old and was nothing but gravel. So I'm reluctant to jump into the waterproofing membrane. Do we have an idea how long it's supposed to last? There's the really expensive stuff that you're supposed to be able to replace the asphalt on. And then there's the cheaper stuff, which I don't know that it even lasts 5 years.
Yeah, the great thing about working with bridges is you don't know for 20 years if it works or not. So you make your best guess. You know, and we've got, you know, some of those, they didn't do anything with the asphalt. They did just that. What we're doing in Nebraska is when we can, we're putting a 3-inch overlay, asphalt overlay. So our expectation is that they replace that asphalt every 12 to 15 or 17 years whenever they get to it. We would expect them to come through the bridge, mill the asphalt off the bridge and pave it just like they're paving the road. You know, part of the reason for doing it is you have the seamless transition between the road and the bridge. We're using, we think, one of the keys when they put it down in the 1970s, it was on a smooth deck. So when we're retrofitting, where we're putting a membrane on an existing deck, we're doing some scarifying or some grinding or whatever to get the deck smoother. So we think that's going to help us. Typically, we're using the fabric membranes, the roll-on membranes. On our interstate bridges, we're using the spray-on type. If it's on a curve, you just can't roll that fabric around a curve without it, bunching up. So we're doing spray-on with that. Of course, it's more expensive. It's supposed to work better. Again, I'll talk to you in 20 years. I'll let you know if it works or not.
As you're going through putting these asphalt overlays on all your bridges, what are you doing for your expansion joints?
There's some actually really good products these days. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in the morning, but the asphalt plug joint on the bridges, the short bridges with not much movement. What we're trying to get at is just we're paving them. We don't even, sometimes you don't know even which joints are working anymore. So the ultimate goal is to pave them and then come back a year later with a kind of a district-wide contract to come in and put these asphalt plug joints in. Because with those, you just come in, you cut the asphalt out, you put the joint in. It's just a kind of a poured-in joint. There's also some nosing material that we found that's been working really well. It holds up to snow plows, stuff like that.
Who's putting those joints in? Is it district crews, you said?
No, this is contractors. And we're finding that why we would rather do it on a district contract, because the contractor learns a lot after doing one of those plug joints. And we find that if we give them more than one, if we can do it district-wide, they get pretty good at it. And it becomes, it's the asphalt contractor that's good at doing those types of joints.
You said you do 3-inch overlays. You come in and mill all of it off, and
oh no.
Just mill 2 inches off.
Yeah, the intent with the 3-inch asphalt overlay would be come back to mill 1 inch or 2 of the off. We want to keep the membrane in place. We don't want to, if we can, we don't want to touch that membrane again.
Any questions of the panel members for the audience? All right. Seeing no further questions, we're about 5 minutes ahead of time, so I want to give a round of applause for our volunteers to come up here.